218 BC, a Carthaginian general by the name of Hannibal crossed the Alps in winter to invade Italy. Hannibal was a force of nature, a man whose brilliance and courage was exceeded only by his hatred for Rome. Swiftly but surely, Hannibal dealt two crushing defeats to Rome in quick succession. In a panic, Rome appoints a dictator by the name of Quintus Fabius Maximus, who decides to combat Hannibal using what we now call the Fabian strategy. Instead of waging a war of direct combat, Fabius decided to wage a war of attrition, aimed at wearing down the Carthaginian general and his fearsome army. Little by little, surely but steadily, Fabius wore down his opponent, cutting off Hannibal's supply lines and weakening his army. Ultimately, despite Hannibal's prowess in open battle, it was this war against an enemy he couldn't fight but instead had to endure that ultimately proved to be his undoing. It was Fabius's techniques in the end that were later employed by the Romans that finally defeated Hannibal. Unfortunately, Hannibal's predicament is not too uncommon, especially in the 21st century. Sure, we might not be facing a Roman dictator in combat, but we can certainly draw parallels, because with utmost certainty, if I can tell you anything at all, let me tell you this. Your life will have its wars of attrition, where you can't make the problems go away, where they persist chronically and stubbornly refuse to disappear. And the only choice you will have is in how you endure them. It may take the form of chronic illness or crushing debt, social stigma or abuse. So, what do you do when you're caught between a rock and a hard place with no way out? And what does this green 22-year-old know about life's struggles? Admittedly, not much. In fact, I've probably had it very easy compared to a lot of people out there. However, children have smaller airways, making childhood asthma particularly debilitating. From frequenting hospitals like a dipsomaniac frequents the local tavern, to missing out on the simple joys of childhood, like ice cream, to the occasional added bonus like pneumonia, I'm quite the veteran. Now I'm going to spare us all the pity party, because if I believe anything at all, it's that the only person who can make you a victim is yourself. So, how does one go from being neck deep up shit creek without a paddle to actually making some progress in a direction you'd like to be headed? Well, while making it to the summit of Hochstadter's Dome, I realized I was badly out of shape. Sure, I thought I had trained enough, but somehow this small little peak that I had underestimated threw me a curveball I didn't see coming. So, as I struggled on, my breath rasping, lungs burning, and legs on fire, yet somehow surrounded by nothing but ice, I looked up at my guide, who shook his head at me and said, "Man, take smaller steps, would you?" Does that seem a little too simple? It is. Often we burn ourselves out because we're trying to do too much to help ourselves. When you're struggling, I want you to remember to take smaller steps. You don't have to stack on more weight than you can lift at the gym. You don't need to starve yourself to lose those extra pounds. You don't even have to cram every single night to be a better student. Whatever your task, break it down into smaller steps and do a little at a time. And remember, you're still going to get there if you move a little slower. In fact, the chances of you actually making it are probably greater because you're less likely to burn out along the way. The second rule I want you to remember is a little harsh, but I promise you, it works like a miracle. Take it from someone who's long suffered from verbal diarrhea. Here it goes. You'll get there faster if you stop talking. Or, as I like to say, never miss a good chance to shut up. Harsh, right? Well, research at NYU, led by Peter Gowitzer, showed that announcing your goals publicly makes you less likely to achieve them. Okay, how so? Well, as it turns out, when you announce your goals to the world, it actually satisfies your self-identity just enough that you're now less motivated to go out there and do the hard work that needs to be done in order to achieve them. Telling people what you're planning on doing gives your brain a false sense of accomplishment. So, do yourself a favor and zip it. Remember, you have the right to remain silent, and when in doubt, shut up. This includes social media. Trust me when I say, no one wants to read your long captions. In your Instagram stories, don't solve anything. If there's something you want to change, remember rule 1 and take small, consistent steps towards improvement. Third, I want you to remove thought from the equation. Are you kidding me, Russell? I'm dead serious. According to the National Science Foundation, an average person has about 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts per day. Of those, 80% are negative and 95% are repetitive. But there's one more thing I need you to realize, and that is, thought isn't action. Thoughts don't change anything. They don't make a difference unless they're enforced by actions. And often we waste too much time thinking rather than doing. During my crevice rescue training as part of my mountaineering course, we were split into teams of 2. While one of us had to jump into a crevice, the other had to anchor him and quickly build a rope system to haul him out. So, while my Japanese partner hung by a single rope attached to my harness over a bottomless chasm, I struggled to build my rope system. Panic set in, and I began to pull at the rope instead of tying the necessary knots into the anchor. Instead of building the system I had spent hours practicing, I began thinking about my partner who was dangling over the lip of a crevice with full faith that I would be able to get him out alive. I began to fumble and the rope cut deeper. Unfazed, my instructor walked over, knelt down in the snow, and told me to take a deep breath. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't thinking of what could go wrong. He didn't even break a sweat. He simply told me what knots to tie, and then watched on. It made me realize that thinking about a situation isn't always helpful. Sometimes you've got to leave thoughts aside completely and let action take the lead. In fact, I now use this approach to most things in life. Eliminate the need for thought in unnecessary places, especially when you use thinking as a crutch to avoid action. Have you ever thought about how tired you were before going to the gym and ended up taking a day off? Or spent so much time planning how you were going to study for that test instead of actually studying? Sometimes you have to leave thought aside and remind yourself that you just have to get to work. 4. Consistency beats intensity every single time. Every single time without exception, if you are consistent, if you stay persistent, and if you keep on keeping on, you will make it through. A tool that's helped me greatly in this regard is measuring my consistency with any new habit I'm trying to inculcate. What I do is I write down every task that has to be done every single day, like exercising or practicing my musical instrument, or even reading a book and looking up the new words. And then I make tiny little check boxes for every single day of the month and tick the days I've actually put in the work. Now, what I discovered astounded me. Even during the months I thought I was being regular, there were several days in between where I had just slacked off. And adding them together, I realized they made up almost a third of the month. Often we think we're putting in the work, but when you take a step back, you realize there's plenty of room for improvement. If you want to make sure you're doing it right, measure your progress and let the data tell you the real story. Finally, seek out the burn. What is the burn? Earlier this year, I asked my mountaineering instructor how I could better train for more difficult mountaineering expeditions. He didn't say anything, but on the way back to the hut while crossing the glacier, he increased his pace just enough to make me uncomfortable keeping up. Since we still had a good distance to go, I protested a little bit, but then decided to shut up and keep moving. After a while, I was drenched in sweat. My thighs were hurting. We kept moving. I started to have trouble keeping up and my breath grew heavier. We kept moving. By the time I could see the hut, my chest was on fire and I was dying to stop and rest. But the rope kept pulling me along with my instructor in the lead. "Don't stop moving," he yelled. Finally, we made it. But I was out of breath and panting hard. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Exhausted," I replied. "My legs feel like they're on fire." "Good," he said, "because that is exactly how I want you to train. I want you to seek out that burn." And he was spot on. In fact, to quote the greatest of all time, Muhammad Ali, "I don't count the sit-ups. I only start counting when it starts hurting, because they're the only ones that count." Wars of attrition hurt. They are painful and there is no quick fix, which is why I want you to learn to seek pain. Now, before you get all irked, take a moment to think about it. We as human beings have evolved to seek pleasure and avoid pain. To be precise, most living organisms seek pleasure and avoid pain. It's just the way we've evolved. However, if you were to seek pain and postpone pleasure, you would find that success follows you around like an old faithful dog, always by your side and never out of sight. Here's where I need you to just trust me and take a leap of faith. When you're struggling with the personal war of attrition, I want you to stand tall and seek out the burn. When presented with a difficult situation, program your mind to be thankful for an opportunity to seek out the burn. Finally, even the longest day is 24 hours. If you remember nothing else, I'd like you to remember this. The hard times you're going through will end. Just keep on taking small steps, keep silent, don't think too much, and seek out the burn, and you will get through whatever it is you're struggling with. The storm will pass, and in between, for the briefest of moments, you might even find happiness. Thank you.